Shalom Aleichem. Mishnah Yomi is holding in chapter 7 of Shekalim, Mishnah Gimel. Yesterday we talked about finding money on the floor in between the funding boxes or throughout Yerushalayim. And now in Mishnah Gimel, we turn to everyone's favorite food, meat, basar, shenimsa bazara. What do they find? A piece of meat, and it's in the azara, in the temple courtyard itself. So avarim, if it's whole limbs, like a whole arm or a leg or a side, olot. We assume it came from a carbon ola. The chatichot, if it's cut up into pieces that are, more for human consumption, chatat. We assume these are pieces from a chatat because the kohanim would eat the chatat. Yerushalayim, but outside of the temple, in Yerushalayim itself, we assume that meat is zivchei shlamim, because most of the meat that was brought outside was shlamim. And I mean outside the temple courtyard, but in the city, within the walls of Yerushalayim, where shlamim could be eaten. But in both cases, to ubar tsurato, you have to wait for the appearance of the meat to change. Basically, you have to leave it out to rot. Then it has to go and be burned in the place where disqualified offerings get burnt up. And when we say the appearance has to change, we mean we have to wait long enough for it to become notar. Notar is pieces of carbon or meat from a carbon that has gone past the allotted time. So for chatas, you get a day and a night to consume the chatas, and after that it's notar. For the shlamim, it's a day, a night, and the following day. So they have to wait until after this time just to make sure that it's no longer valid and kosher, and then they could burn it. But really, lemaisa, they can't eat any of this meat because it might already be notar, or it might be tameh, there might be something wrong with it, if you're not sure. Nimsa begvulin, the Mishnah goes on, if you find it outside, we mean outside of Yerushalayim, avarim, if it's whole limbs, nevelot. We assume it's a nevela or a treifa, perhaps, because if it has a nevela or treifa, you can't eat it, so you're not going to bother cutting it up. But chatichot, mutarot. If it's cut into bite-sized pieces, they would be mutter. The Mishnah concludes with a shata regel, and during festival times, shebasa merube, that there's a lot of meat being bought and sold and consumed. Af avarim mutarin, even whole chunks are mutter. Someone might go to the butcher and buy an entire side of beef or half a lamb to feed his family for the regel, for the festival. Now, one caveat here is we must be talking about a place where it's all kosher butchers and Jewish meat, because as we're going to learn in Chulin, there's an issue called basar shnet alam min ayin, meat that was not properly supervised. If you're in a place where there is non-kosher meat as well, and this meat has not been under hashgacha or under a seal or, safely in your refrigerator, then we're concerned that non-kosher meat might have been involved too. So you can't just go eating meat off the ground or off a table that you find in Baltimore. On to Mishnah Daled, behema. Now it's a whole living animal. Shenimseit, that you found it, Yerushalayim vad Migdal Eder, from Yerushalayim up until Migdal Eder, which is, not that far away. Apparently about 6 or 7 miles, 11 kilometers away. Uchmidoso l'kol ruach, and the same distance in all directions. So if you find this animal within this radius, zecharim, if it's males, olot. We assume they are a carbon ola that escaped. Nekevot, if they're females, zivchei shlamim. We assume they are supposed to be a shlamim, but they ran off. Rabbi Yehuda adds, haroi lepsochim, if it's something that could be a carbon pesach, it's a lamb or a goat, male in the first year. So pesachim, it's a pesach, kodem l'regel shloshim yom, within 30 days before the holiday of Pesach anyway. So we don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda, and it's interesting that Kahati brings the Gemara has a big kasha on this Mishnah because it doesn't matter merely the gender of the animal, but the age also matters, because a Pesach has to be the first year, as we've mentioned, but in the second year, maybe that's a Toda, and you'd have to bring the Lachmei Toda, and a 1-year-old female could be a Hatas, and a Hatas can't be used out of Suffolk, would have to be left to die. So the Gemara brings a lot of intricacies. It's not so simple as Mishnah, and the Rambam paskins like the Gemara. Yashar kochachem and zay gesund.